Hey fam, want to check out Roland Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Unfiltered. Press play.
Martin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118,
2019 is here. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, our first show in the new year. Of course, it is Thursday, January 3rd, 2019. Today, the first day of the 116th Congress. Democrats, they swore in Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Also, 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus also sworn in, the largest class in American history. Our cameras were there as they had their ceremony at the Warner Theater. We'll show you. You'll hear from Nancy Pelosi. Of course, you also hear from Steny Hoyer. And, of course, the new chair of the CBC, Karen Bass of California. All right, folks, and speaking of course, Democrats got some new rules they're going to be putting forth, including the issue of pay-go. You got progressives who are saying, horrible idea to pass it. Other Democrats say, no, it's a smart deal. We have two economists, two different views, who'll break down exactly what that means. Also, we're covering the story out of Houston where a 7-year-old girl gunned down by a white man driving a red truck. We'll talk with the family attorney, Lee Merritt, about the latest on that particular case. And also, a strange case out of Georgia. A black man 2.5 years ago shot 59 times by cops. Feds were involved, but the feds will not cooperate with the Fulton County DA. I will talk with him right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. How many of you also saw the video of that sister working at the McDonald's who beat the hell out of this white boy who tried to grab her? She should have whooped his ass. If you haven't seen the video, we'll show it to you. And also, I got a couple of things to say today about women's history, of course. That is, women getting the right to vote 100 years ago. That was white women. It was not for sisters. And I'll break it down for you. Folks, it's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, folks, things have changed in Washington, D.C. as the Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, as well as the White House for the last 2 years. Now Democrats are in control of the House, and trust me, it will be a new day in the nation's capital. Also today, Nancy Pelosi, she was sworn in as Speaker of the House, and so we are looking forward to that conversation as well. Plus, we also, folks, we're at the CBC swearing in today. That took place, of course, 55 members of the CBC, the most in U.S. history. We also live streamed the entire ceremony, and so we're going to share some of this with you. And so here are some of the highlights. Okay, so we don't have audio. We don't have audio where, guys? Okay, so we don't have audio, folks, on our tape. They're working on it as we speak. But let me break it down to you. Today at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C., a packed house, more than 1,000 people were there to watch the CBC swearing in. Now, first of all, it was a ceremonial swearing in, but it's what they do every 2 years where they actually present all the different members. You also hear from Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House, Steny Hoyer, who is the Majority Leader, also Jim Clyburn, who is the whip, in addition to the incoming CBC chair, Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. And so, as I said, we live streamed the whole event. If you want to see the full ceremony, simply go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. But here are some of the highlights from today.
But as we begin anew, more than 40 years ago, the Congressional Black Caucus recalled and accepted the challenge of Representative George Henry White of North Carolina. Representative White was the last of nearly 40 African Americans who were forced out of the United States Congress after emancipation and Reconstruction and the beginning of Jim Crow. They were strategically forced and removed from office through the systematic voting disenfranchisement of African Americans and redistricting, a fight we continue. In his departing speech on the floor of the House, he said, "This perhaps the Negro's temporary farewell to the American Congress, but let me say, Phoenix-like, he will rise up someday and come again." Today, my friends, it is safe to say we've indeed come again, and to borrow and embellish the words of Maya Angelou, and still we rise. March on until victory is won.
Under leadership of Marcia Fudge, Terry Sewell, John Lewis, we will be introducing and passing the Voting Rights Act in this Congress. We'll be doing all of we will be passing, and working with Eleanor Holmes Norton, we will be having hearings and putting forth legislation to giving voting rights to the people of the District of Columbia. We'll be doing all of this under leadership of our big daddy, Mr. Clyburn, House Democratic Whip, Mr. Clyburn. Thank you for your leadership and your guidance in so many of these areas. And what's exciting is that we're going to have so many chairmen from the Congressional Black Caucus. Let's just see. Maxine Waters, Chair of Financial Services. Bobby Scott, Chair of Education and Labor. Elijah Cummings, Chair of the Government Reform Committee. Elijah. Eddie Bernice Johnson, Chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I got him. Protecting us all, the Chair of the Homeland Security Committee, Benny Thompson.
The Johnson brothers said it to us all. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on. Nobody here, nobody that sits here, believe that victory has been won. There is an unfinished agenda, and there is no group in the Congress of the United States more than these 55 members of the Congress who sit before you who are any more committed to marching on for what America means and what America must be for all of our fellow citizens. God bless the Black Caucus who blesses their country. Thank you very much.
It was 2 years ago that I stood at this podium in very vulnerable and dark times. And I said that there was one thing that I knew that this CBC was not going to do. We weren't going to laugh if we didn't hear a joke. We weren't going to scratch if we weren't itching. We weren't going to dance if we didn't hear music. And we're never going to run because we're always going to be true to our God and true to our native land. With that, let me introduce you to the next chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the phenomenal woman from Los Angeles, California, Karen Bass. Karen, I need to I will present the gavel to Chairwoman Bass, and unlike what G.K. Butterfield did to me, you can actually keep this one.
Thank you. America is becoming more diverse, and that diversity is leading to the browning of our nation. Instead of a celebration, the reaction from some has essentially unleashed a dragon that is gasping its last breath, and so he is dangerous as he lashes out. The dragon is hate, the dragon is white supremacy, and they have a leader. In the past, people would have been embarrassed to be associated with white supremacy, but today some have moved from embarrassed to emboldened. However, at this moment in history, there is a fundamental difference. We will have tremendous power and influence. At this moment in history, we are equipped to lead like never before. We are equipped to govern, and we are equipped to resist when and where it's needed.
Now, among the folks we caught up with after today's ceremony included Tom Perez, chair of the Democratic National Committee.
The 116th Congress is going to be a Congress to be remembered because not only do we have a historic number of African Americans, we also have a historic number of women. And in addition to that, I think when you look at the leadership of the 119th Congress, it is something that would perhaps terrify the people who tore the nation asunder for the Civil War, to see that even though they pushed us down into the murk and mire, we are now people who are leading the United States Congress in the year 2019. So I'm excited about it. There are going to be some ugly and dark times in front of us because I think the president has done some things that are going to eventually fall back on him and to some degree damage the nation again when people find out fully what he has been doing financially and maybe even in some areas that I won't even talk about at this point.
We have a lot of influences, chairs, and a much larger caucus, but our focus is going to be on advancing the agenda, making sure people have better wages, make sure they have safer work sites, quality health care at an affordable price, higher education and K through 12. There are a lot of issues that we're going to be working on, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of support. So we're looking forward to working with people around the country to make sure that we can advance our agenda.
CBC has always been the conscience of the House of Representatives and, frankly, the nation. And now the strength in numbers, the number of committee chairs and subcommittee chairs, what that means is that the conscience in action with the power to make change, the power to make sure America works for everyone, the power to make sure we invest more in schools rather than prisons, the power to make sure we restore voting rights and restore our democracy and restore opportunity in every zip code. That's what today means. We got a lot more work to do, but it is such a proud moment to see so many incredible people, strength in numbers.
Now, that, of course, was this morning, a little bit later, of course, over on Capitol Hill. Democrats, they actually elected Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Here was Hakeem Jeffries of Brooklyn putting her name into nomination.
Nancy Pelosi will fight for a country that provides for the poor, works for working families, makes sense for the middle class, stands up for senior citizens, innovates in the inner city, and strengthens suburban communities. Nancy Pelosi is a woman of faith, a loving wife, a mother of 5, a grandmother of 9, a sophisticated strategist, a legendary legislator, a voice for the voiceless, a defender of the disenfranchised, a powerful, profound, prophetic, principled public servant, and that's why we stand squarely behind her today. Let me be clear, House Democrats are down with NDP. Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi, the once and future Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, I proudly place her name in nomination. May God bless her. May God bless the United States of America.
All right, folks, let's now bring in our panel. Dr. Craig Carr, Chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University, Teresa Lundy, founder, TML Communications, and Alan Scott Bolden.
A. Scott Bolden.
No, first of all, that's what everybody at your college said what your name was, but you try to get all bougie when you come to D.C., A. Scott Bolden.
Can't we start
former
chair.
Hell no.
Okay,
no.
2019 let's go.
This is the 400th anniversary of 20-odd Africans arriving. We gonna speak truth to what's going on. Your ass trying to be bougie by going by A. Scott Bolden, former chair, National Bar Association PAC. All right, so let's deal with this here. It's very interesting. I had some people, Greg, who were. I was talking about this on social media, and they were saying, this really means nothing. And then, of course, you got all these folks who saying, will the CBC be advancing a black agenda? And let me just be real clear. If you're one of those people out there who consistently ask the question, why isn't the CBC, why aren't they advancing a black agenda? You're stuck on stupid. Because if anybody, Greg, understands the history of the CBC,
yes, sir.
And unfortunately for a lot of people, they have no clue what members of Congress literally do every single day to act as if having 55 CBC members isn't important is nuts.
It's crazy. I mean, in fact, we can look today. House Majority, this was in Politico, House Majority touts its first black female floor director. Shawanza Goff is going to be running all the legislation through Steny Hoyer. There's a lot of black folks. Now, I will say, you know, maybe Hakeem Jeffries is starting his campaign to be Speaker of the House a little early. I think he went a little over the top with that kind of. But that having been said, everybody's saying that needs to pay attention. The first bill introduced in the House today, H.R. 1, pushing through everything from campaign finance reform to gerrymandering to voting rights. There's black folks all up and down that legislation. And to have that greater number, Emmanuel Cleaver opened up with prayer today on the House floor. Those Republicans, I'm looking at Kevin McCarthy, I'm looking at them like their heads are about to explode.
But why isn't that just symbolism? We've always had black people in the caucus. We've always had black people in the representatives.
That's why I started with the legislation they introduced, brother.
But does that represent real power or real symbolism?
Well, I think it has to be translated
black people
now.
Full of symbolism, right?
It has to be translated into power.
Okay.
Here's
the caucus has always had a challenge doing that.
Now, stop. Hold up. First of all, Julian, you're not on the panel. Okay, you here on another topic, so you got to wait your turn. You got to wait your turn. Okay, they not gonna talk. They not gonna talk in your segment. You ain't talking in their segment. See, now I'm telling you right now, I'm checking everybody in 2019. But let me deal with this. Here we go to my iPad. So over the Christmas holidays, you don't see it. Let me go here, y'all. Come out here. Check this cable here. And I'm laying this out for a reason. So I tweeted this. So the CBC sent out a statement when the Farm Bill was signed into law by Trump. And what they did was they talked about the role the CBC played in the Farm Bill.
Yes.
Now, here's a piece. And I listed all. So if you want to see this, go to Twitter and put in hashtag Farm Bill CBC. And then the 2018 Farm Bill stripped a decades-old provision mandating that 1890 land-grant universities, 19 public HBCUs, could only carry over 20% of federal funding if it wasn't used in the calendar year. The rule did not apply to predominantly white land grants. That was changed. Also, there was other areas of increased funding for HBCUs. And so I listed.
No, make that point, Roland. I put about. You gotta stress that. That's major for black colleges.
The Farm Bill protects the Civil Rights Department at the USDA from reorganization and political interference. Specifically, this language prohibits implementation of actions, policies, or decision documents until a civil rights analysis is conducted by the agency. And then it also lays out here, let's see here, the bill requires states to report to Congress how much funding they're providing both historically black land grants and their predominantly white peers. Provisions championed by Congresswoman Alma Adams of North Carolina, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. The bill provides $10 million a year to establish research centers on at least 3 HBCU campuses with specific focuses such as food security, and the Secretary of Agriculture is tasked with picking the campuses, again, championed by Alma Adams. And the last one before I want to go to y'all, the bill includes about $40 million in mandatory funding and $40 million in discretionary funding for new scholarships at each of the 1890 land grant universities, meaning each will have at least $2 million in new funding for scholarships to lure students over the next 5 years. Now, that's just the Farm Bill. You're not going to see CBC members with their names on the bill as the sponsor. But what members of Congress do, Scott and Teresa, is that they're able to make changes. Literally, if a word or a line is removed, if something is actually added, it can actually create changes. I just think for some reason, folks really don't understand the role of politics and the role that somebody plays. They may say, oh, this person here, they only had 2 bills passed in 20 years. Right. But you don't know the role that they played in 300, 400, 500 other bills.
So, Roland, let me just say this. I think that represents real power, right? And I'm on the same page with you. I think what I'm really trying to get at from the CBC standpoint is leadership is defined by what you're known for, your effectiveness, and why. And so when most people who look like you and me think about the Congressional Black Caucus, they think about the legislative weekend, they think about the parties, they think about one of our legislative leaders who was once head of Ways and Means Committee, who's no longer with us. And so I think the CBC, no matter how big they get, there used to be a time when it was incredible just to have black congressional members. And now I think from an image standpoint and from their own marketing standpoint, how do they market their power and effectiveness, just like you did?
Well, Teresa, I had a congresswoman, first of all, you're in communications. I had a discussion with Congresswoman Karen Bass. One of her focuses, she says by the end of her 2 years as head of the CBC, she wants to make sure that that's not an issue. And so one of the things that we talked about was the fact that, so for instance, with this digital show, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton had a CBC discussion on Capitol Hill about Trump's judicial nominees. We live streamed that particular event. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke had a particular event as well that we also live streamed. And I said, look, there are things that your members are doing that no one knows about. I said, and if your people also are not talking, I said, look, ABC, NBC, CNN ain't going to be showing up to y'all stuff. And I literally laid out a strategy in terms of how they should be maximizing black media outlets, maximizing black syndicated radio, maximizing the 30 largest urban markets, those radio talk shows in those markets as well, in order to actually get that message out. There are a significant number of things that CBC members do, not only for their districts, but also that affect other parts of the country, that people literally have no idea about, but you have to also create the narrative to explain that.
I agree. And I think the 55 CBC membership will also bring a new opportunity of digital engagement. But again, it is about what you said, Roland, about reinvesting into the urban media in those urban markets. So take it, for instance, if they decided to, put a budget together and they're like, we want to put $1 million and invest in communities. I think the CBC should actually continue to do that year round, instead of just the monthly newsletters that they currently do in DC, because, outside of, some of the issues that, just takes place in D.C., I think locally they can, engage and probably uplift their communications a little bit more in their community.
But Greg, news organization.
I definitely wouldn't walk away from mainstream news sources, but I would actually start looking at what that narrative strategy is to local engagement. So going back to their districts and actually implementing it.
But the thing, though, Greg, but you also have to look at this thing as a collective. So what you have now is you have 5 CBC members who are actually chairing committees. And so when you begin to talk about, so for instance, the Oversight Reform Committee, the name was actually changed because their actual intent was not just government oversight, it also was in the private sector. They've changed that name. Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland is actually the chair of that committee. When we talk about Homeland Security, when we talk about the wall or the fence or whatever you want to call it along the border, that's going to be Congressman Benny Thompson from Mississippi. When you begin to talk about the issue of education, that's Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia.
Who you interviewed.
That's right. When you talk about what's going to be happening with science technology, Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson. And now we talk about financial services. We're now talking about Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We're talking about banks. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has already made it clear that her committee is also going to be challenging corporate America on diversity on their boards and also in their C-suites as well. And so not only that, then you have 20-plus members who are going to be chair of subcommittees. That's right. And so what I'm trying to paint a picture for folks to understand is not to look at this as like, okay, fine, you get a swearing in. That, look, this is the largest number of black members ever. In 1901, when Congressman White was forced out, when all those black folks were forced out of North Carolina, there was some 40 black caucus members in Congress. That's right. It was 28 years between 1901 and the next black member of Congress. That's right. So to be in 2019 to have the largest group of the largest group in all of Congress being the Congressional Black Caucus, that is significant if we also learn to work with them to leverage that power.
Absolutely. It's funny. Each one of those folk represents so many others. and then there's the coalitions. I mean, for me, Ocasio-Cortez should have been on that stage. Why? She's Afro-Latino. She's from Puerto Rico.
Well, in fact, the Black, Latino, and the Asian American caucus represents about 130 members.
Exactly. And that's not just the member.
Wow.
So you have two. Julian, I told you. You are not on this panel conversation.
You looking at him?
I told you.
All right.
Trust me. Now, when you get to your segment, you ain't going to want none of them to say nothing. So, Greg, go ahead.
But Roland, the point you're making is very important. Because when White gave that famous Phoenix speech in 1901, when he said, yes, you're putting us out, but like the Phoenix, we will rise from the ashes. He was saying it at a time when there weren't 50 states. So in terms of percentage of black representation, you go back to Reconstruction 150 years ago, you can see that significant. But it isn't just the individuals. It's their staffs. It's the people they're working. Yvette Clarke, who you interviewed, Yvette Clarke has been a leader on immigration reform. Because immigration reform impacts black women and men from the Africa, the Caribbean. This country has changed forever. And to Teresa's point, you know, they're not going to ignore the Euro stream, the white stream, but technology has disrupted that forever. So whether they are not, Scott, it's not just simple, though.
They still have to do the hard work.
And they're doing it.
And,
I mean, you heard what
Swanville to be there, right? I understand that.
Look at what the Brennan Institute.
So now they've got at least 2 years.
They're already
to make
doing it. What I'm saying, at this point, they're going to run into a stone wall in the Senate. We know that.
I know.
But
with that many chairmanships,
but here's the deal. First of all,
that's true. What are you going to do with it?
But here's the piece, though. Of the first several bills that Democrats are going to put on the table, one of them was deal specifically with the voting rights.
They did it today.
The Shelby v. Holder decision.
Yep. That's right.
They said, you know what, Republicans have been messed around for the last 4 years. Fine, we're going to put that on the table. 2, D.C. statehood.
Yes, sir.
So now what's going to happen is Democrats are going to have to pass those two. Now the thing goes to, okay, McConnell.
Right.
Are you now going to ignore that? Right. So now it goes over to the Senate. Okay. Or do y'all now want to blow that off? And so now they have to own up to that. The point.
Well, why wouldn't they just blow it off? They're not going to pass that.
No. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it dies in the Senate. The only role of House members is to pass things in the House. Right. They don't control the Senate. Right. But what I'm saying is the CBC's opportunity is to leverage and harness that power to say, we want this,
right?
We want this, we want this, and now if y'all want to mess with us, we got 55 votes.
Don't. Yep. And something you said when you laid out with Benny Thompson and with banking with Maxine Waters, oversight.
Right.
Oversight.
That's the key.
There's a story that just came out of Indiana, for example. These white folks in Trump country are now complaining because the EPA hasn't cleaned up their thing, and they want hearings now for the EPA because their children are dying of cancer. They voted for Trump. Now that comes to the Congress. When you start talking about Benny Thompson, Homeland Security, like you say, slats, wall, whatever, Benny Thompson, they're about to get into details and watch these white folks who call themselves Trump voters switch once these black folks over these committees start.
And in fact, here's what I would suggest. Do what Bobby Kennedy did in 1966, 67, 68, where they moved those hearings to those areas.
To those communities.
How about, don't have the hearings in D.C., have the hearing in those towns.
Yes, sir.
And then tell Vice President Pence, to your point, the town of Indiana.
Yes, sir.
You were the governor.
Let Andre do it.
Why don't you come on back, have the conversation again? And so everybody who's watching, I'm about to go down next door, but I need y'all to understand, we're going to be, first of all, our goal the next, every quarter, actually the first 6 months, to have every CBC member on this show. Have at least 2 to 3 every week so you understand what is going on. First of all, holding their feet to the fire on issues that we care about, but also talking about things that you may not even realize is actually going on. All these things are critically important, which is why this show is important as well. And so we're going to be doing that. So this, of course, is just the first day Democrats are in control of the House. But let me also say this here. So there are 55 CBC members. Mia Love, of course, lost in Utah. She was the only Republican in the Congressional Black Caucus. There's still 2 other Republicans, black Republicans in Congress. Will Hurd of Texas, Congressman Will Hurd of Texas, and Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Both of them are not members of the Congressional Black Caucus by their own choosing. And so just want to let y'all know that. So of the 55, all are Democrat. last Congress, you had one who was a Republican, Mia Love, but she got voted out. So Hurd and Scott are not members. All right, folks, I'm going to a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about this story out of Houston. 7-year-old black girl shot and killed, which is just this stunning story. And so we're going to get caught up with that with the family attorney Lee Merritt. We'll also talk about this whole issue of pay-go. You might be on social media, and we have a lot of progressives who are saying horrible idea for Democrats to include this in their rules. Others who are saying, no, it's a smart idea to have pay-go. We have two economists on the show. That's the segment Julianne is here for, that she's not going to want them talking in her segment. You know, trust me, watch. Trust me, she ain't going to want them talking in her segment. And so we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. And so we're going to a break right now. We'll be back. Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Knowledge is power, and power is the key to changing things. Writer Jill Nelson.
Folks. All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day. Our university is Livingstone College, founded in 1879 in Salisbury, North Carolina. Notable alumni, American social activist John Kennard, civil rights activist and educator Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz, and author and Bishop George Lincoln Blackwell. To give, go to www.livingston.edu, livingston.edu. All right, folks, now, when a new party takes over the House of Representatives, they propose a series of rules by which to run the House. One rule, I don't know why Julian is still talking. Lord have mercy. One rule has gotten a lot of progressives riled up. It's called pay-go, which just stands for pay as you go. It means that any time a piece of legislation will increase spending, that same legislation has to find an offset for that spending, which means that if you want to spend over here, something got to get cut. Now, it has to happen either through cuts or tax increases. Now, progressives in the House want to know why they have to pay for their policies now when Republicans didn't have to pay for their tax cuts. So let's break this thing down. We got two folks, economist Julianne Malveaux, who y'all have seen already throughout the show, and Dr. Michael McLean, assistant professor of business administration in the Hampton University School of Business. All right, so for the audience, so let's break it down right here. So, Michael, like pay-go or you against pay-go?
Pay-go is a pretty good idea. It's designed to stop congressional members from either spending too much that they can't pay for, or on the flip side, it's not just a spending issue, it's to prevent tax cuts that are not paid for as well. So it works both ways from the spending side, but it also works to prevent tax cuts that are not paid for.
Julianne, all right, you for pay? Hold up, you're for pay-go, against pay-go?
I'm against pay-go.
Why?
I'm trying to figure out when Michael got this little epiphany about pay-go. The Republicans cause us a deficit, and all of a sudden now Democrats want to get on their bandwagon and say pay-go. So what it means is that it shackles Democrats in terms of social policy. It shackles us in terms of what happens. So you got this idiot in the White House who decides that you're going to have a deficit. It's okay. Now, Democrats come in and say, so we don't want to do anything wrong. We're going to pay-go. No. The way that
hold on, Michael, hold on. Let her finish. I'm going to come back to you. Go.
The way that Keynesian economics works is that when we have surpluses, we save. When we have deficits, we spend. But we basically have created false deficits because of the gifts that we gave to corporations. Pay-go is a way to restrict Democrats from doing the right thing around education, around health care, and around a number of other things. It makes no sense.
Yes. Pay-go is not a new thing. It has been around since the 1970s. So pay-go has been in the House for a long period of time, as well as pay-go has been in the Senate with even more restrictive rules on the Senate side for paying for both expenses and for any tax deductions.
But you know, Michael,
so they have had.
Hold on. Finish. Go ahead.
Michael, pay-go's not a new philosophy.
All right, Julianne.
You know, they have always had waivers when they chose to, waivers when they wanted to spend more money on the military or other things. Now is a time with this new Congress to talk about waivers to do health care, waivers to feed people, waivers to do the American dream. And this pay-go nonsense, it is nonsense. It's really about attempting to shackle Democrats to a Republican ideology that says that you can't spend money unless you spend it on corporations.
Now,
and you know that.
So, Michael, here's interesting. So, I want both of you to answer this. And so, when I was at the CBC swearing-in today, I was talking to one of the members who is not a conservative member. Guarantee you, he would be called a liberal or progressive member. This is what he said. He said that, first of all, when Democrats, when Bill Clinton was president, there was a surplus that was left, and of course George Bush had tax cuts, and they turned that surplus into a deficit. He said the reason pay-go makes sense is because, one, you have to deal with the deficit. Two, he said the amount of money that we're spending on interest, he said that money versus continuing these deficits, you could take that money that you're spending on interest and actually apply that to various programs. He said, so Democrats, he said, now, Democrats could play the game of, oh, Republicans, they had no fiscal responsibility, so what the hell, let's follow along with them. He said, I don't want to be like them. He said, I do care about the deficit. So the question is, if with pay-go, if it causes you to say, look, if you want to spend this, something got to get cut or we increase taxes, doesn't that force folks to make those decisions? And why can't Democrats then say, all right, we're not going to add another $700 billion to defense spending. We're not going to add another multiple billions of dollars for something else or for this damn wall. We want to spend it over here. Isn't that pay-go?
That is basically pay-go, that if you want to take money and spend it on a particular item, you have to have some offsetting either spending reduction or increasing in taxes. So everything has to be offset for a spending piece of legislation, and that is basically what pay-go is. And every year the Office of Management and Budget has to look at all the expenses, or all the spending Congress has done, all the tax cuts or spending decreases they've done, and if they have spent more than what their other offsets are, then there's a group of programs that simply have automatic spending cuts built into them.
Julian.
This flies in the face of Keynesian economics in terms of the ways that we balance things. I agree that we need to look at what we cut, but I also think that there are investments that we make, investments in education, investments in housing, investments in all kinds of things.
Who pays for that? I mean, because first of all, here's the deal. There's somebody at home who's going, look, I don't know who Keynes is. I don't know Keynesian. All I know is in my own. No, 1 second. Look, I'm speaking like an average person because I'm literally looking at their comments right now on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube.
So they tell me I'm crazy.
No. What they're saying is the problem with this whole conversation is, and with Congress, is that it's not how people actually live their lives. That if you want something, if you say, Mama, I want this, it's like two things gonna happen. Either you gonna get that, or you gonna get that, or I got to go out and make more money to pay for all this, but I can't pay for everything. Otherwise, I'm gonna be in hot. I'm gonna have a deficit. I'm gonna be broke as all get out.
Personal deficit, Roland, is not the same as a structural deficit, and that's what people need to understand. You did not lose anything when that orange orangutan cut taxes and gave money to corporations. You personally, Roland Martin, Scott Bolden, nobody lost anything from that. And so
hold up. When he did that, correct me. When he did that, has that not increased the federal deficit?
It increased the federal.
Does that now mean that federal taxpayers are spending more on the interest on that deficit than were before?
So then let's roll that back as opposed to talking about Medicare, Medicaid, education, all that.
But hold up. But isn't that a part of pay-go? That if you want... Wait a minute. Allow me to finish the point.
Yes, sir.
So if Democrats say, we want this, and it's going to cost $1 trillion, can't they say we want to roll back the $1.5 trillion tax cut to pay for that? Ain't that called pay-go?
Well, it's not called pay-go, but that works for me.
Well, what the hell is it called?
That works for me. The point at the end of the day is that we have to balance what we invest in people and what we invest in corporations.
Hold on. Michael, final comment from your perspective.
Yes, pay-go is simply trying to control Congress to not spend more than they're able to bring in, and that is also prevents them from reducing any further taxes without finding some offsetting method of paying for those tax cuts. So it goes both to the spending side and the taxing side.
Okay, all right. So first of all, the reason I want to have this conversation because a bunch of y'all have been on social media all day, and y'all been following Alexandria Ortiz. Y'all been following all of the people. Y'all keep saying pay-go. So we want to have the explanation and the story to explain to you exactly what it means. And so, Michael McLean, Hampton University, we appreciate it. Julian Malveaux, Bennett College, President Emerita, we appreciate it as well. For the rest of y'all, if y'all still are clueless, guess what? That's called Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. Because, hell, they don't even know what in the hell is going on.
Yes, I do.
I said Capitol Hill. Scott, no. You couldn't talk to the last of it.
Really
well,
important.
okay, but you can tweet it. All right, so it's a piece. I'm going to our next story, y'all. No, we done. We good. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. No, I'm just telling you. We did it to explain to people what's going on. No, not. The segment's over. That's cool. You can tweet about it. All right, y'all. Let's go to our next story. And this story happened over the last several days, and it's actually a stunning story. It is out of my hometown of Houston, Texas. So 70-year-old Jazmine Barnes was with her mother. And they were in a car at a Walmart. And all of a sudden, a red truck drives up, fires a gun into the car, killing her. Now, of course, the girl's mother, LaPortia Washington, was driving the car. She and Jazmine and 3 other daughters were out for a coffee run near a Walmart. Now, this is the mom speaking from the hospital bed the day of the shooting. The mother, of course, was shot in the arm.
I replayed this moment in my head over 1 million times to see, did I cut this man off? Did I make a wrong turn in front of him? Did I stop him from getting out of the Walmart for whatever he was doing? Did I do anything wrong to cause this man to fire shots in my car? And I didn't. I didn't do anything. I didn't make a wrong turn. I didn't get over in his lane. I didn't do none of that. He fired off at us for no reason. None.
Now, she is now out of the hospital. Of course, the reward is approaching $100,000 for the identity of the driver of the red pickup. You have seen a lot of people on social media, activist Shaun King, civil rights attorney Lee Merritt. They've been spearheading the reward fund. And today they were joined by Houston, Texas wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, who is donating his $29,000 playoff check, the wild card game the Texans play on Saturday against the Indianapolis Colts, to pay for funeral expenses and to go to the reward. Also, Shaquille O'Neal has said that he also will help to defray the funeral expenses for Jazmine as well. Joining us right now is attorney Lee Merritt. Lee, first off, I was while we started the show, I got a notice from Periscope where officials were giving an update on this particular case. What can you give us? What's the latest in this case?
The Harris County Sheriff's Department released a composite sketch of this individual. The previous description said this was more of a heavyset man with a beard. From witnesses who were there, who now that they've been released from the hospital and had some time to rest, they described a more pale, blue-eyed. At best, he had a 5 o'clock shadow, but no beard, a thin man, and so that is the most recent breaking news, and so we're circulating that image around the Houston area in hopes that somebody will recognize him.
Hold on one second, Henry. Go to my iPad. I went to the Houston Chronicle website. We have the image up right now. And again, Lee, you say this is the image. This was based upon various witnesses talking with sheriff's officials, correct?
That's right. In particular, Jazmine's sister, Alexis, she saw this man pull up beside of them right before he started shooting. He pulled up to the passenger side while they were at a light. and she did like like a lot of us do. She glanced over to the person next to her. She noticed him looking. He seemed, in her words, he seemed sort of ill. He had a sort of a strange look in his eye, but she didn't think much of it. She turned her head and kept looking forward. As they put on the light, he went from the passenger side and drove around to the driver's side and immediately began firing on the vehicle. And so this was her from feet away looking directly into his eyes. So she was our primary descriptor in putting together this image.
And so he was driving a red truck, and they still have not identified who he is. What specific? We have the image up right now. The image that we're seeing, was that taken from a nearby store surveillance camera?
Yeah, that was taken from, I believe, the Bank of America surveillance camera there. I'm not sure, after speaking with the sheriff, I'm not sure if that's before or after the shooting, but that is the maroon truck. I know there was some discrepancies whether it was red or maroon, but as specific as we can get with so little detail, it was a darker red or maroon truck that was involved in the shooting.
Obviously, the reward fund is, first of all, when it comes to the reward, is that being handled by your law office? Is it through law enforcement? And what is the reward amount up to now?
Yeah, it's been handled by my law office. Initially, that was my only involvement in the case. Sean and I discussed how we could use our platforms to try to get some more attention on the case. When it happened around New Year's Eve, there was very little. And so we wanted to encourage people to bring forward tips, and we came up with $25,000. Then individual private donors started adding to that pot. We got up to $100,000 earlier today. It is being handled directly by myself via Sean King. But the other donations from Mr. Hopkins to Shaquille O'Neal to other people who have generously donated to this family, they are all being handled separately.
And also, the father also created a fund for his daughter as well. What information do you have on that?
Yeah, Chris, the father, Sevilla, has a GoFundMe that is going to help cover some of the expenses that come with these kind of tragedies. Neither of the parents have been able to go back to work. They both are gainfully employed, but obviously with this tragedy going on, they haven't been able to work, and they still have the Jazmine siblings to provide for, as well as dressing for the funeral. The funeral costs which are now covered, but there's still just day-to-day expenses that come with it. And both parents have went ahead and retained me as counsel. And so you can find both of their GoFundMes and fundraising efforts being funneled through me, through my websites and through my social media accounts. And generally, if you find it on Sean King's sites, that's because he's cleared it by me. And so those would be the official places that you can give and donate.
So, you first of all, you started trying to help. Have you signed on as the family attorney?
Yeah, I've signed on as a family attorney specifically for this reason, Roland. We're learning a lot more information about the shooting, and it has all the telltale signs of a hate crime. It doesn't seem just random, both because this area of Houston has a reputation for racial discord, particularly a white supremacist element. There is a very, very similar shooting in August of 2017. Where the shooter in that case was still at large. He targeted a black family, a grandmother, another young woman, and a 21-year-old man. He shot the grandmother. He shot the young man in the leg twice. The same way he ambushed the car. It was a white male in a pickup truck that matches this description that we now have. And it's difficult to say that these two aren't related. We don't have anything directly tying them, the two, but this happened within the same stretch of highway within 6 miles from where this shooting took place. And so there's so much going on that I want to continue to use my training and use my experience to guide law enforcement towards hate crime litigation where we see appropriate.
Last question for you. Even though of course, law enforcement has not said this is a hate crime, is there any involvement of the FBI at this point in this case?
The FBI is working closely with the sheriff's office as well as the Houston PD. So there's several law enforcement agencies working together. And I haven't spoken, or my client hasn't spoken directly with FBI investigators. Obviously, you want to put motive comes after actually catching the suspect. So we all can speculate at motive, but all these agencies are working together just to figure out who this person is. And once that happens, I certainly expect the FBI to investigate him for ties to hate to the hate community.
All right, then, Lee Merritt, we certainly appreciate it. Keep abreast. Be sure to text me anytime, giving updates on this particular case. It's going to be a rally on Saturday in Houston, and, of course, the funeral for Jazmine will take place on Tuesday.
Thanks, Roland.
All right, Lee, thanks a bunch. I want to go to our panel here. Again, I think it's important to have federal authorities involved in this as early as possible, even though they have not clearly established this is a hate crime. Because hate crimes are federal crimes, the FBI can also get involved and help a local jurisdiction, Scott.
Well, the state may have some hate crime laws, too, but for the independence of the investigation, that's super important. You know, they've got the truck. They've got some eyewitnesses. There were other cars, I presume, around this truck, so they're going to have to look at that. You know, the difficulty with a crime that has no prior connection to the victim is you have a 5 to 10% chance of finding the bad actor. If there is a prior relationship, that's where the police are going to start. I doubt there is one based on what I just heard, but there may be. But then what they're doing with the fundraising, what they're doing with the rallies, that's all important to keep pressure on the police, because someone saw that vehicle. If this is a serial hate crime killer, then somebody knows something. And so my hope and prayer is that it gets resolved and that the killer is taken off the street. Henry, but we got to keep the pressure on.
Henry, go to my iPad, please. There is a hate crime law in Texas. You might remember, of course, when James Byrd was dragged behind the pickup in Jasper, Texas.
Right.
It was initially vetoed by George W. Bush and then later signed when he was governor. This is a graphic on the Department of Public Safety in Texas where they break down 53.9% of all hate crimes in Texas are racial. But when you look at this number here, you see anti-white, 18 offenses, anti-black, 103. And then multiracial, anti-Indian. And so the reality is, if you add up every other group, Jewish, Hispanic, Arab, Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, and white, it does not even come close to equaling the number of anti-black cases. Teresa and Greg.
So I actually want to see, and I know justice is going to be served in this. I just got to be hopeful in this, right? But what I do want to see is legislation come from the representative of Texas, because obviously this is an ongoing trend. The numbers are staggering. The difficulty gets harder and harder for families and, of course, members of color. So we can't feel safe to, even go to Walmart or go, to the gas station. Then that's when the laws need to step in. And
well, you already have a Texas law.
It has,
so you already have a state.
You need to amend it or something, because something.
Well, here's the deal. First of all, you have a state law.
Right.
A law is not going to stop somebody from committing a hate crime.
It's not.
But at least you have the law. The issue now is, can you get enough information out there, Greg, where somebody's going to talk when they hear that $100,000? Are they going to turn this particular person in?
That's what you're doing right now, Roland. That's why this show is so important, and your platform. So we heard Brother Merritt say that. He said, how can I use my platform? Sean can use his platform. And then you got Shaquille O'Neal. You got this brother from the Texans. This is the thing that strikes me. We're not waiting on the government, but that strikes me both ways. You can't rely on the government. The government has failed black people. There has never not been a time in this society when there hadn't been open season on black life. 150 years ago this year, Tennessee became the first Reconstruction government to go into the Redeemer phase. They're going to take Reconstruction back from these Negroes. 100 years ago, it was the Red Summer. Now, they're talking about lift every voice and sing. Well, James Weldon Johnson also called 1919 the Red Summer. Why? Because they were attacking black people in the streets. 50 years ago, it was after the long hot summers in Newark and Detroit. And here we are in 2019. What does it mean? It means that our lives are not safe. This white man pulled up and blew a little baby away and shot multiple times, hit the mother, hit her sister, and guess what? We're not waiting on the government. Sure, the law is there, but these brothers and sisters stepped up and said, here's the reward. And because of this show, because of this platform, somebody's going to watch and say, wait a minute, I know that truck. I know that truck. That's why now more than ever we have to have these platforms.
Well, you talk about, of course, you talk about the importance of shows, also African Americans stepping up. This is also why black DAs matter. Go to our next story. Okay, Jamarian Robinson, was 26 years old when he was shot and killed, shot 59 times by police in 2016. It was 2.5 years ago, August of 2016, and he was killed in his girlfriend's apartment in East Point, Georgia, near Atlanta. He was shot by a fugitive task force made up of various Metro Atlanta officers and at least one U.S. Marshal. And the early police report said that Robinson fired at least 3 times at the police, but a gun found at the scene was damaged and inoperable. Now the district attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, Paul Howard, is suing the federal government because they are not cooperating in his investigation of the shooting. I talked with DA Paul Howard earlier today. All right, DA Howard, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
We're happy to be here, Roland.
So let's talk about this case here, the fact that you say that federal authorities are hindering this investigation. Explain why you are going so aggressively after the feds.
Well, this incident involves a young African-American male, 26 years old, who was shot by a group of law enforcement officers, 16 officers to be exact. And the incident took place on the 5th of August of 2016. As it turns out, the medical examiner's reports show that this young man was shot 59 times. We were presented with an investigation from our state GBI investigators, and since that time, we have been trying to determine exactly what happened that precipitated this young man being shot 59 times. We have requested in writing more than 3 times specific information. We have actually had a private conversation with the U.S. Attorney here, and we have made several open record requests for information, and we have not received it.
So in this shooting, who has jurisdiction?
Well, it's a kind of strange arrangement because this was a state aggravated assault warrant. It wasn't a federal warrant. It was a local or state warrant that was issued by the Atlanta Police Department. But all around the country, what is going on is the local officials, local law enforcement agencies are connecting or working with the U.S. Marshals, and they then call themselves members of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force. But the work that they're performing is still basically state and local functions. And so in this case, what the federal government contends is that this was simply a federal operation and that the local DA does not have any opportunity to investigate what happens. We believe that that's clearly not true because even in the memorandums of understanding between the marshals and the local departments, they point out that, first of all, if there's a question of use of force, then that is to be handled by the local jurisdictions. And they also indicate that each one of the local officers has to follow his own local rules.
So here's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand here. So here you have a young man shot and killed 59 times. And you're trying to get information. They won't give you the information. Well, is the U.S. attorney prosecuting the case? Because if the U.S. attorney's not prosecuting the case, are they acting as if nothing happened?
That's correct. In fact, you get the impression that they are acting as defense counsels for the law enforcement officials that are involved. And that's our very question. We have been asking them, has there been a federal investigation? You would think that maybe there's a federal report of what happened. We have not received any indication that such an investigation has taken place. And if a report was put together, we have not seen that report. And that's one of the reasons that we filed this lawsuit.
Again, this took place 2.5 years ago. And you're not, first of all, you're not even making a judgment as to whether or not these officers were right or wrong. I get the sense that what you're simply trying to do is get all the available information to ascertain exactly what took place to determine what your next step is.
That's absolutely correct. In fact, one of the questions that we're asked is, well, what do you plan to charge these officers with? Well, we're trying to, first of all, to get to the bottom of this incident. We're trying to simply find out the truth. We believe that that's what the family members deserve, that we believe that's what our community deserves, and I think that's what these officers deserve, is to get to the truth of the matter.
Do you believe, and I can understand if you don't want to answer the question, but I have contended that under Jeff Sessions, there was this whole attitude to police officers, we're not going to question you, we're not going to stand in your way. He even said we're going to pull back from these consent decrees, because talking about how it was hurting the morale of police officers by having federal jurisdiction. And I kept making the point, I'm sorry, you still are not above the law, that if you're a police officer, local, state, or federal, I mean, you have to abide by the laws as well. And so it sounds to me like, even though Sessions is not there, that the Department of Justice is somehow just standing in the way, not trying to seek justice or to seek proper answers, whether to clear these officers or even to pursue charges against them.
Well, Roland, I think what you've raised is a very valid point, because it's important for the public to understand that when shootings like this, when they've occurred in other locations in our country, when the claim is made that they're federal incidents, then what that has meant is nothing happens. There is never any prosecution. So I don't think that it is accurate to say that that has only happened with Jeff Sessions, because if the data is examined, I think what we see is that this has been going on for a long time in our country. Mm-hmm. But I think because of people like yourself, that citizens are now beginning to ask questions.
Last question I have for you. I'm reading this Land Journal-Constitution story, and it says the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta, which is under the DOJ, offered to let your prosecutors interview officers, but with restrictions on what they can ask, which the DA said wasn't acceptable. Restrictions?
I thought that was crazy. We're investigating the death of someone who has been shot for 59 times, and it's a death that happened in my jurisdiction, and I just can't imagine the Justice Department indicating to a local district attorney that you could ask a question, but you're simply limited in the approach you can take. I find that that is unacceptable, and it's fairly reprehensible that they would even make such a suggestion.
Well, Fulton County DA Paul Howard, we surely appreciate you joining us. We're going to stay on top of this as well. Surely keep us abreast of if you get any response from DOJ, and we certainly would do our part to ask questions here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much for having us on today.
Teresa, I'll start with you. This is, I mean, you have a U.S. Marshal, one U.S. Marshal involved. The rest of them are local and state. But to completely ignore a DA, he was shot and killed 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. And it's, again, a terrible time in this country where, and I'm glad they're saying they're kind of putting in the arms of the citizens that actually need to step up and ask more questions. Because right now, especially with this case, it seems like, when there's no communication, there's lack of responsiveness, there's not going to be anything that gets done. It sounds like they're kind of cleaning it up or maybe protecting someone or something. And I think we need to find that right now more than ever. So,
Scott, this is, I mean, again, to have federal authorities essentially telling an elected DA, the hell with you. We're not even going to just answer your questions. This, to me, is an abomination.
Well, as a former prosecutor, this happens a lot more than most people think because you don't see it in a lawsuit. There are other options that the DA has here. He's investigating. I'm surprised there's no civil lawsuit, which on the civil side would get to the bottom of a lot of this. The DA could also put this case into the grand jury and issue grand jury subpoenas to all of these officers and bring them in and just let them tell their story if they're not going to be subjected to an interview or it's limited. Remember, DOJ said to them, we'll let you talk to them, but there are certain questions they will not answer depending on what the investigation was.
Well, but here's the deal, though. But you won't even share the investigation with the DA.
We can't. Hold on. We can't control that. So now this DA has some other options.
Right, which is why he's going public. But also, some of the officers also have already told his office. They've been told, don't you say anything to the DA.
I understand that. And you know what? We can't change that. So what you do is you got a grand jury. The family has a possible lawsuit because civil justice will get to the bottom of a lot of this. I'm surprised there isn't one of those. But this DA could also go above the U.S. attorney, go to DOJ, and see if they could get some relief. There's something they're trying to protect. It's not just because it may be a hate crime or police brutality. There may be something else that's super sensitive in a broader investigation. I'm not defending. What I'm saying to you is this DA chose to sue, but he's got some other options.
Greg, damn that. It's been 2.5 years. It's been 2.5 years.
Right.
Well, I mean, thank goodness a black DA is saying, damn it, y'all gonna answer my question.
A white DA would have the same question.
I ain't buying that one.
No, there's no race-based prosecution here. Give me a break.
To the point you raised.
Okay.
One person died, 59 shot. A black or white DA
No. But in the interview with Paul Howard, he clearly said a black man was shot and killed 59 times. Greg, go ahead.
It's not a racial fact.
What I'm saying is that race always matters, Scott.
I didn't say it didn't.
Okay, well,
but don't tell me a white prosecutor wouldn't be asking the same questions.
149 years ago, July 1st, 1870.
I was not here on this earth.
No, you weren't. That's why I'm about to tell you.
But you can at least read a history book.
149 years
ago,
July 1st, 1870.
Go ahead, Greg. Break it down.
The United States Department of Justice was established. It was established under the presidency of the man who took office in 1869, 150 years ago.
And therefore,
wait a minute, hold on.
Therefore,
hold up.
This is the
First of all, he's about to unpack this thing.
That's okay, Roland.
Go ahead.
This is the genius of ignorance.
Not mine.
Yours in this case.
Not mine.
And everybody else is in this case. When we don't understand the past, we repeat it, brother. Mm-hmm. The Department of Justice was established under Ulysses S. Grant, who won the Civil War in part to go after the Ku Klux Klan. A year later, 1871, was the Ku Klux Klan Act. The Department of Justice's point was to put federal prosecutors in the South to stop racial terror. Now, fast forward to 2019.
Really fast forward.
You've got a department.
No, hey. Hold on. Stop. Hold up. You're going to finish your point. First of all, it's my damn show. Take as much time as you need. I'll tell you when to wrap up.
See, this is the thing.
Go ahead, Greg.
You know this.
I ain't going to let no Kappa tell an Alpha he on the shot clock. Greg, go ahead. I don't care if you're the lawyer. Go ahead. I don't care if you're the lawyer. Thurgood Marshall was a lawyer. Alpha. Go ahead, Greg.
And you know the reason I got a law degree and didn't practice law is because I understand the political nature of law, brother. You go in the courtroom. I decided not to go in the courtroom. One of the reasons I didn't go in the courtroom is because I understand that behind the law is the politics. And behind the politics is why you get a black DA like Howard. Did you see that little thing on his lapel? Mm-hmm. That was a shield. Mm-hmm. That means he's law enforcement. Jeff Sessions, an unreconstructed racist from Selma, Alabama, is the one and the attitude being driven from the White House that's saying the department that was set up in part to stop racial terror will withdraw.
Well, now, every white prosecutor
come on now. Let's not drill down to individuals.
Well, why not?
We're talking about systems now, law. Wait, you're a lawyer, right?
I'm a lawyer.
Well, if you're a lawyer, then you understand the nature of law. No.
Let's not.
Come on now. Now let's be clear.
So you think the feds just don't want to see any justice done?
What I'm talking about is the nature. What I'm talking about is the nature of government and society. Meaning that what you just said about a civil suit, what you said about a local DA challenging the feds,
grand jury investigation,
all of these things operate within a legal universe.
But they cooperate on a daily basis all around this country. This is a unique case.
Scott, it's not unique. That's my point. That's why if you understand the history, you understand the cycles. We're talking about pendulums. Let's bring it. Let's
you
tie it all together.
You don't think the feds and the state cooperate every day across this country?
Oh, no. Of course they don't cooperate.
Of course they do.
Ralph Bush said in the 1930s that the Negro is a special ward of the federal government. Meaning what? When the federal government has been used as a tool to
have those cases, but that's not par for course. Course for par, whatever the term
You
is.
look at an individual tree.
Because that's what
you
the story
can't see
is.
the forest, bro.
I got the forest.
No,
if anybody
clearly
sees
you're not,
the forest,
because you lost in the forest.
I've been on the defense side.
Here's what we know. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, so to your point, Scott, that this is one case. So recently, 2 weeks ago, Roland had Elmer Daniels' lawyer, right, on the show talking about how Elmer Daniels was incarcerated for 39 years, right, because of wrongful injustice and that conviction, right? One of the prime reasons of why Elmer was in Daniel for 39 years of wrongful incarceration was because of the evidence. Now, if Elmer didn't have a private attorney to reach out and investigate to the Department of Justice and the other FBI, Elmer would still be in jail today.
I agree with you. I represent people who have been wrongfully incarcerated. I'm talking about this story. Neither one of you all get into this story.
So what about this story?
Here is what we know about this. Here's what we know about this story. Here is what we know about this story.
Talk about this story.
What we know about this story is the U.S. Attorney in Atlanta, not helpful. The feds in D.C., not helpful. What we do know is they are stymieing this investigation, and like I said to D.A. Howard, keep pressing the case, and we'll be right there with you, covering every aspect. Now, we talk about injustice in Florida. Let's talk about what happened on New Year's Eve in St. Petersburg, Florida, when a white man lost his damn mind. A crazy-ass white man became irate with his sister at McDonald's and tried and grabbed her, and she commenced to call hashtag Team Whip that ass. Press play.
Yes, sir. Yes.
John, wait. Hey, John. I'm on it.
All right, so here's the deal. The dude got upset because there weren't any straws in the condiment area. Now, in St. Petersburg, they passed a law to ban plastic straws by 2020. The sister was trying to explain this to crazy-ass white man, but he wasn't trying to have it, and that's when they began to go after it. Now, the sister, yeah, she's a former boxer, and she was straight throwing haymakers at his silly ass. Now, you saw the brother trying to pull her off, and then finally he stopped and went around and then pushed the white man back as well. Now, McDonald has released an official statement on the status of her employment. The man, of course, had to be physically kicked out after he became irate with other employees, even kicking one on his way out the door. The man was later identified as Daniel Taylor and was arrested by police. The sister, she is now hired an attorney to also represent her. I keep telling y'all, white folks are losing their mind, and I'm telling you this, and I'm trying to warn y'all. Somebody white is gonna get killed. Like the white boy in was it Seattle? Yes. When he called the brother working at FedEx a nigga, and the brother punched him in his face, and homeboy died. Yes, I'm telling y'all, one of these white folks is gonna end up get shot and killed when they come across the wrong black person by calling the cops and accosting them. So I'm just trying to warn all y'all crazy ass white people. Y'all might think y'all emboldened by Trump. Right. But trust me, it's going to be a GoFundMe account for your ass to bury you when you roll up against the wrong black person. I'm just being honest.
Brother, look, don't let your MAGA get your ass kicked. Because that sister right there put the hand of Ogun on that white boy. She put that iron fist.
But let's also talk about, how he then called the police and said he was attacked.
Of course.
Because he was being mighty white.
But you reach across to a woman that looked like she's 5'3", 5'2". Look at this. She's defending herself.
She's tuning him up. Tuning him. Look at her.
Oh, shoot.
A half a minute. She's trying to defend herself, and it's unfortunate that even the employees don't even. It seems like McDonald's needed
helping her.
Well, it looked like they was trying to pull her off.
First of all, if you look at most fast food restaurants, you might have 4 or 5 people who work in. You over minding your business. It's not common for you to also. She whooping somebody's ass. So it's not like you running over there. And I'm telling you, probably look. Is this actually happening?
But the brother DC.
Well,
New York. That white man would have died.
Okay, y'all, this was in St. Petersburg, Florida. Have y'all been to St. Pete? I was just there last month.
Come on,
And
brother.
what? The brothers ain't bringing it.
It ain't that many of us there.
No, don't do that in Harlem, brother.
St. Pete is a retirement. It's a retirement community in St. Pete.
Don't do that.
Ain't that many of us here. So, first of all, McDonald's, y'all know.
What's McDonald's saying?
They ain't saying nothing yet.
They said it's under investigation.
Y'all need to make her employee of the year.
I'm just saying, McDonald's. Wait, McDonald's. I mean, hello, McDonald's. Where your former CEO was black, Don Thompson, Alpha. I'm just letting y'all know. Okay, y'all might want to say something. Okay, folks. Last point before I got to go. We're over our time. It's our first show back. But I got to get this in. First of all, we actually would have been on time if Scott kept interrupting Greg. Then with Julian, then he went arguing with Julian. That was 15 minutes right there. All right, so I want to deal with this here. So earlier today, when Nancy Pelosi was being voted upon for Speaker of the House, Liz Cheney, who is head of the Republican caucus, she stood up. She's a Republican, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. She stood up and she talked about this being the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote. So I then tweeted about that, saying, let's not forget that was for white women. It wasn't for all women, including black women. Right. Now, first of all, you got some little dumb Republicans who try to get all upset with me because obviously none of them have actually read a history book. Then you had some white folks trying to white-splain to me history by saying, well, no, the law did give black folks the right to vote. Then I had to go ahead and break the history book out on they silly ass. And so here's why I'm doing this. Because, see, the issue that I have, Greg broke it down earlier, the issue that I have is when we don't understand foundations and how things were created and what happened when these things were created. First and foremost, yes, in August of 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified. But let's understand that it was southern states that did not even want to give women the right to vote. Go to my iPad, Henry. If you go to history.com, they show right here, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Virginia all did not want women to have the right to vote. Tennessee was that remaining southern state. It was tied 48-48, and there was a Republican who got called out by his own mama saying, you better vote for this doggone deal, and that's how it got ratified. Tennessee put it over the top. And then after it was ratified, the last state to ratify the 19th Amendment was the state of Mississippi in 1984. Now, why am I saying all of this here? Because later, when Nancy Pelosi talked about this being the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, and people say, well, you ain't dog Nancy. First of all, I wasn't dogging Liz Cheney. I'm trying to give y'all history. When somebody says women got the right to vote in 1920, that's a lie. White women got the right to vote. Now, even though the Constitution does not specifically specify white women, they were talking about white women because black women, especially in the South, couldn't vote immediately in 1920 and 1921. It took the 1965 Voting Rights Act for that to happen. Come on, brother. I'm trying to get us to understand that because, see, then I had to break it down to somebody that if you want me to somehow believe the 19th Amendment and included black people, well, hell, the 15th Amendment should have been enough when it came to giving us the right to vote. But in fact, the 15th Amendment only gave black men the right to vote, even though the Constitution didn't specify gender. Okay, so if that's actually, and in fact, if you really want to take this thing further, come on, brother. Well, hell, the 14th and the 13th Amendments should have all applied. So there should not have been even a need for an additional amendment. That's right. I need us to understand that we have to push back on a lot of this nonsense to get people to understand that when certain laws were passed, they were not meant for us. If we go along with this narrative that, yes, women got the right to vote 100 years ago, no, white women got the right to vote. Just like I need us to understand how white women have been able to benefit from the black freedom movement. Because if you want to understand Title IX passed in 1972, that didn't have a damn thing to do with volleyball or basketball or softball. That was about opening professional schools up to women to be doctors and lawyers and dentists and engineers and professors. Title IX, a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And so all of these white women who have benefited from Title IX, they have benefited from the hard work of black people who got the 1964 Civil Rights Act signed into law. And so I need us not walking around letting folks just say stuff, oh, well, this was passed in. Well, no, understand, just like we just had Emancipation Day, when you, of course, had New Year's Day. But see, before you talk about, of course, emancipation in terms of the Emancipation Proclamation, you got to also deal with what happened on that particular day in Haiti.
That's right.
Where they also gained their freedom.
Come on.
And don't you understand that one of the things that white people in this country were afraid of when Haiti got their independence was that slaves here were going to do the exact same thing? I need us to stop walking around listening to his story and have a better understanding of history, because it better frames conversations. And so some folks today on to Twitter who got schooled by trying to come at me, and I'm telling you, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do more of this, because if y'all keep trying these games, I'm going to publicly embarrass you because I got more followers than you do. I'm going to publicly embarrass you because we need to check folks who clearly have never, ever had a proper history class. Class is now over. Scott, you got homework. All right, y'all. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered?
I knew all of that. I went to Morehouse College.
Okay, that don't mean nothing.
Yes, it does. That University Law School.
That don't mean nothing.
Nothing from that soliloquy.
That don't mean nothing.
Nothing.
That don't mean nothing.
I mean nothing.
Because I guess what? You were taking some notes like, I ain't know that.
Am I your target today?
And I ain't know that.
I did
and
know
I ain't
that.
know that. No.
Brisbane, brother.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
I was one of Brisbane's boys.
Yeah,
Don't
okay.
say that, because Brisbane wrote all this in his book.
Yeah.
Don't say it, because you clearly were napping in his class. All right, y'all. Y'all want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. We want you, all of you.
I ain't write a check.
First of all, you've been saying you write a check for the last
but
6
you
months.
talk about me so
I mean, that's what you keep saying. That's right. Don't worry about it. You can't write a check anyway. You know Erica writes checks. I'm going to go ahead and call her.
Get it from
all right, y'all. So go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. Don't forget, you can also, if you missed the swearing in of the CBC early, we live streamed this morning. Go to our YouTube channel. You can check it out as well. And so we look forward to you doing that. All right, folks, we got to go. Tomorrow, we got a great lineup for you as well. We'll give you a breakdown the first day of House Democrats being in control. And we'll also be talking to more CBC members, and a brother who's a chef was going to be on the show tomorrow talking about how the history of black folks cooking has been infused into America cuisine. So we'll have that on tomorrow's show. And Ben Crump will be joining us as well, talking about the sister who improved her SAT score by 300 points. And now they're trying to say, well, we're not going to allow your score to be used to get into Florida State. So she busted her butt studying, but now y'all questioning her score. Oh, yeah, we're going to put this private company on blast. And they gonna feel the wrath of black people as well. So y'all white folks that want to lose y'all mind too, go right ahead. Because remember, in August of this year, 400th anniversary, the first 20 Africans arriving, I'm just letting y'all know, I ain't got no problem whooping that ass all in 2019. We just getting started. Holla! You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.